For step 2, I need to attach my long dress pieces, which is piece 1 and piece 1A, which you should have cut out together. So this is my piece 1, and this is my piece 1A that was taped before I cut. So now I'm just going to find the dot on this pattern, which is here, and mark that. And I'm actually just going to mark mine with a pen because I know that I need to stop stitching once I reach that point. Alright, so now I'm just going to take my pattern piece off. Alright. And once I've removed that, I just need to pin together the top of this dress until I reach the dot, because that's where I'm going to stop sewing. So you should have right sides together whenever you're doing this. You should have both right sides together of your fabric. Which should have been how you already cut it out, so you shouldn't need to move anything around if you cut it out correctly. Alright, and this is now ready to stitch. So let's sew it down. So we're just going to stitch these two pieces together, right sides together, at 5/8 of an inch. So stitch, back stitch a little, and then just continue on. Because this piece is so long, it's a good idea to pull the fabric you've already sewn in the back away from the machine, just so your fabric doesn't get too bunched up here. Okay, now I'm about to reach my last pin, which means that that is my dot and where I need to stop sewing. Okay, so back stitch. And then that seam is done. So go ahead and go trim out your threads, and then this seam also needs to be pressed open. So go to your iron and press this seam open. For step 3, we need to stay stitch the neck edge. So I'll just go ahead and show you that on the sewing machine. This is that same piece that we just sewed together in step 2, and I have pressed it open. Now I'm going to go to the top of the neckline here, and starting at 5/8, I'm just going to stitch 5/8 across this entire piece. Make sure when you get to the seam that it's open and flat. And I'm going to pivot here at the neck because it's a V shape. Okay, so now that is done and we can move on to the next step. Moving on to step 4, we're going to take our pattern piece 2 and we're going to finish the bottom edge. So this is my already interfaced piece 2. And you just want to make sure you get the right one when you do this. So match up your piece, and what you're going to be stitching is this bottom line here. So I know that this is what I need to be stitching, so I'm going to start right here. And if you have a serger, this is a really good thing to put through the serger. Since I'm at home here in Kentucky, I don't currently have my serger, so I'm going to use one of these other stitches. I'll use stitch 10, and it will make a decorative stitch that will also just keep my interfacing and my piece together nicely, as well as make a nice finish. Alright, so that's what it looks like. Now it's very pretty at the edges there, and that will keep my pieces together and keep things from fraying so badly as I'm wearing the dress. Moving right along here to step 5, we're basically going to be attaching the piece 1 and 1A now to our piece 2. So this is my large 1A dress piece, and I'm just going to go to the top of that. You grab something to anchor this in place. All right, much better. Okay, so this is the top of my 1A. And now I'm just going to do right sides together and grab that piece 2 that I just finished. And I'm going to pin them together at the top here. And the things that you need to mark are on the piece 2 pattern. So on my piece 2 pattern, you need to mark this large dot here, and then also the triangles here. So I'm doing that now. Normally you would do this on the right side of your fabric when you're cutting, but obviously if you put interfacing on something, you're going to lose that marking. So just mark here. And then you need to flip that and do it for the opposite side as well. Great. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is start here at the edge and just pin my pieces together. And I'll do that on both sides. Then I'll match up my dots here as close to the front as I possibly can, because you really want that to be even. So your seam from the piece beneath is right in the middle here. That looks good. Okay. So we're going to be stitching the sides of the arms here and then also in the front. So if you go back to your pattern piece, you're going to be putting the sides together and then just stitching right between those dots. So the next thing I'm going to do is match up my armholes here. Match up your notch. Okay, and go ahead and pin throughout this entire section, and then you're also going to pin that same section on the other side. Once you've done that, I'll show you how I sew this on the sewing machine. Okay, so here's the top part of the dress after I pinned it. And I'm just going to do one of the shoulder seams now. So I'm just stitching this down with a permanent stitch at 5/8. Right sides together. If you're new to sewing, always check that you put your right sides together. And then back stitch. Okay, and then you also need to go to the middle of that where you made your 2 dot markings, and you're just going to stitch right in the middle of that at 5/8. Okay, so stitch, back stitch, and then back stitch again when you reach the other dot. So that takes care of the middle 2 dots and sewing that. Now we need to finish our last armhole edge. stitching, back stitching, and then just continuing at 5/8. And back stitching. Okay, so now you should take this to your ironing board and try to press the seam open in the places that you sewed as best you can. So try to press these open. So now we need to finish up the rest of step 5, and most of that is trimming and also clipping. I've already trimmed out this side. Now I'll show you how to trim out the next side. You're just going to go to your seam that you should have already pressed open as much as you could, and you're going to cut about half of that out. Okay? So just trim about half of that out. Make sure you don't grab the nice side of your fabric underneath. And then after that we need to clip the middle. So here's the middle of the dress. It has 2 dots, and you're just going to clip right to those dots, but don't actually clip through your seam. Okay? Alright? And basically whenever you flip this out later, the reason you clip those is so that these 2 pieces can come out freely. Like so. Alright? So moving on to the next step, we're going to be understitching. So we need to understitch our shoulders here. So let's do that next at the sewing machine.